I want you to try something with me for a second here.
Right, I'm game.
Think back to a really strong, vivid memory. It could be, anything at all. Maybe it's a childhood birthday party where you remember the exact color of the icing on the cake.
Oh, yeah, or like that nervous, cold, pit-in-your-stomach feeling from your first day at a new job.
Exactly. The sound of the office door clicking shut behind you. Now, when you pull that memory up right now, it arrives with a very distinct sense of replay, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels perfectly intact.
Yeah, it feels as though you are quite literally hitting a play button on a video clip that your brain just, filed away in some dark mental cabinet years ago.
Right.
And that feeling of hitting replay is incredibly convincing. But the mission of our deep dive today into the science of memory is to prove why that specific feeling that you're watching a mental video recording is actually a complete illusion.
It is an incredibly persistent illusion, too. We all fall for it every single day. The reality we find in the research is that memory is not a recording at all. It is a reconstruction. It's actively and honestly, painstakingly rebuilt from scattered, isolated fragments every single time you call it up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and once you truly understand the mechanics of how that rebuilding process works, it completely changes how you view your own past.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because I know that sounds like a huge paradigm shift. And I want to promise you right now, as you're listening, you do not need a background in neuroscience to follow this journey.
Not at all.
We are going to take our time and walk through this together. We're going to use everyday analogies. So if memory isn't a video recording sitting on a shelf, what actually is it? Like, how does an experience first get saved to begin with?
Well, we really have to start at the very beginning of the cognitive assembly line. Memory is not a single monolithic thing. It's actually a combination of very different biological systems.
Okay.
The first crucial distinction to understand is the difference between short-term memory, which is often called working memory, and long-term memory.
So that's like the difference between trying to hold a Wi-Fi password in your head for 10 seconds versus, say, remembering the layout of your childhood bedroom.
That is the perfect distinction. When you hold a phone number or a password in your head just long enough to type it into your device, you are using working memory.
Right.
Think of it as a very small, temporary workspace in the brain. It relies entirely on sustained electrical activity. As long as you are actively focusing on that number, the electrical signal keeps bouncing around.
But the moment you get distracted.
Exactly. The moment you get distracted, the electricity dissipates and the information simply vanishes. It's just gone.
Yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
We all do. But long-term memory, on the other hand, involves actual physical structural changes in the brain. It can last a lifetime. The real magic of the brain is the journey an experience takes to get from that fragile, temporary electrical loop into permanent structural storage.
I like to think of working memory like a tiny, temporary sticky note on your desk. You jot down a number, you use it, you throw the sticky note away.
Right, very disposable.
But moving something to long-term memory sounds much more involved. That journey starts with encoding, right? How does a single moment in time actually get broken down?
Well, an experience arrives through your senses in a massive rush of data. Think about baking cookies with a grandparent when you were little.
Okay, I have the picture.
You have the visual of the kitchen, the auditory sound of their laugh, the smell of the vanilla, the emotional warmth you feel. Here is the critical part. There is no single spot in your brain where that entire cookie baking memory is dropped intact.
Wait, really? It doesn't all go to one memory folder?
No, not at all. Instead, each of those sensory elements is routed to entirely different regions of the brain. The visual data goes to the visual cortex at the back of your head. The sounds go to the auditory centers on the sides. The emotions are processed deep in the center.
So the memory is basically shattered into a dozen pieces the exact second it happens.
Yes, it's completely decentralized. A memory is actually a pattern of activity. It's a very specific set of brain cells, which we call neurons, that happen to be firing at the exact same time across all these different regions of the brain.
And for anyone totally new to this, neurons are just the fundamental cells that process and transmit information in the brain, right? They communicate across those tiny microscopic gaps.
Yes, and those gaps are called synapses. When an experience makes a scattered group of neurons active simultaneously, a chemical and physical process begins.
Like they start reaching out to each other?
Sort of, yeah. The physical connections, those synapses between those specific scattered neurons, actually grow stronger and closer together. The foundational rule of memory science is often summarized in a simple phrase: Cells that fire together, wire together.
Cells that fire together, wire together. I love that. So that structural change is the physical manifestation of a memory. If we go back to the sticky note analogy, encoding a long-term memory is nothing like writing on paper. It's more like a group of musicians representing those scattered neurons across the brain learning to play a really complex chord together.
That's a great way to picture it.
Like the visual cortex is the drummer, the auditory center is the bass player, the emotion center is the lead guitar. At first, they are totally uncoordinated.
Right, they don't know the song yet.
But they practice, they fire together, and eventually, they are so perfectly wired together that if you just hear the drummer play the intro beat, maybe you just smell vanilla in a bakery. The bass and the guitar instantly know how to kick in and bring the whole song to life.
The strengthening of those musical cues is the physical wiring. But following your analogy, if all these musicians are scattered in completely different rooms across the brain, they can't see each other.
Right.
Someone has to conduct the orchestra. Someone has to initially coordinate them so they learn to play the same song at the exact same time.
They need a conductor. So who is holding the baton?
That brings us to a structure buried incredibly deep in the center of the brain. It is called the hippocampus. The name actually comes from the Greek word for seahorse, because if you look at it, it roughly has a curled seahorse-like shape.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and we have two of them, one on each side. The hippocampus acts as an index or a binding agent. During a life event, it's the hippocampus that creates a temporary map, tying together the where, the when, the who, and the emotional feeling into one single episode.
What's amazing to me is that scientists didn't just guess this by looking at brain scans. The way we discovered the function of the hippocampus is actually one of the most famous and, honestly, tragic stories in medical history.
What's fascinating here is the case of a man known for decades in medical literature simply as patient HM. Back in the 1950s, HM suffered from debilitating, life-threatening epilepsy.
Oh, wow.
His seizures were destroying his quality of life. Desperate for a cure, his doctors performed a radical experimental surgery. They completely removed the hippocampus from both sides of his brain.
To wake up from an operation, missing a core piece of your brain's hardware, I mean, what was his daily life actually like after that?
Well, on the surface, the surgery was a success because it stopped the severe seizures. If you walked into his hospital room, you could sit down and hold a perfectly normal, intelligent, engaging conversation with him.
So his personality was fine?
His personality was completely intact. He could use his working memory to follow your sentences perfectly. But if you walked out of the room, waited 5 minutes, and walked back in, he would have absolutely no memory of you or the conversation you just had.
That is wild.
Yeah, without a hippocampus, HM permanently lost the ability to form any new long-term memories. Every few minutes, his consciousness essentially wiped clean.
Wait, so he was permanently frozen in time in the 1950s. Did he remember his childhood or who he was before the surgery?
He did. His older memories from years prior to the surgery remained completely intact. He knew his family, his own history, his old address.
Okay, if he could remember his past, but couldn't make a single new memory moving forward, that tells us something huge. It means the old memories weren't stored in the hippocampus at all.
It was a profound revelation. It proved the hippocampus is only the temporary gateway. It lays down new memories and holds on to the connections just long enough to teach the rest of the brain the pattern.
Right.
But the permanent long-term memories eventually live in the outer folded layers of the brain, which we call the cortex.
Okay, but if the hippocampus is just a temporary sticky note mapping out the connections, what stops those connections from just fading away like the phone number did? How do the memories actually pack their bags and move from the deep brain out to the permanent storage in the cortex?
That transition is a process called consolidation. It is the handover from the temporary index to the permanent archive. And this handover happens largely while you are completely unconscious.
Wait, unconscious?
Yeah, it happens while you sleep.
I think we need to dive into the how here because it sounds like science fiction. How does a sleeping brain transfer a memory without the actual sensory experience happening again?
Well, during deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain shuts out external sensory input. The visual cortex isn't seeing, the auditory cortex isn't hearing. Because it's quiet, the hippocampus can finally go to work.
Yeah.
It replays the day's neural patterns, but it does it in rapid-fire bursts called sharp-wave ripples. It essentially fast-forwards the exact sequence of neuronal firing that happened during the day, playing it back to the cortex at 10 to 20 times the original speed.
Whoa. So it's playing it on fast forward.
Exactly. It does this over and over, essentially burning the pattern into the cortex's physical structure.
It's practicing the song while the audience is out of the theater. This completely changes how I view all-nighter culture.
Oh, definitely.
You constantly hear about students pulling all-nighters before a big exam or people depriving themselves of sleep to prep for a massive presentation. But based on the biological mechanism you just described, an all-nighter is entirely self-defeating.
You are actively sabotaging the exact process you need. By staying awake, your brain is constantly flooded with new sensory data. The hippocampus never gets the quiet environment it needs to generate those sharp wave ripples.
So the memory never solidifies.
Right. The pattern never gets transferred to the cortex. You shut down the assembly line right before the final product is packaged. Sleep isn't downtime. For memory, it's the main shift.
Let's follow a memory that actually made it through. We got a great night's sleep, the sharp wave ripples did their job, and the memory is now consolidated and securely stored in the outer layers of the cortex.
Okay, perfect.
We wake up years later and try to recall it. This is the exact moment where the mental video recording illusion falls apart entirely, isn't it?
Yes. This is the retrieval phase. When you try to remember an event, you are not opening a protected read-only file. Because the memory is stored in all those scattered pieces, you have to actively rebuild it.
The neurons have to fire in that coordinated pattern again.
Exactly. And the major catch of human biology is that in the act of being rebuilt, the memory becomes unstable. It becomes, briefly, editable. We call this reconsolidation.
Wait, I struggle to believe that. When I remember my brother's wedding day, I can vividly see his face and the suit he was wearing. Are you telling me my brain is inventing those details in real time?
It is pulling the fragments together, and if a piece is missing or degraded, your brain naturally fills in the gaps using logic, current context, or things you've learned since. Your brain just, it hates incomplete pictures.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The analogy that comes to mind is opening a saved text document on your computer.
Oh, I like this.
You open it to read a journal entry from 10 years ago. But while the document is open on your screen, your current mood, or the music you're listening to right now, causes you to accidentally type a few new words into the text. And then you hit save.
Yeah.
You haven't just read the file. You've overwritten the original.
That is precisely what happens. Whatever you are feeling in the present moment can seep into the reconstruction of that past memory. And when the memory is saved again, when it reconsolidates, it is subtly altered.
That is terrifying.
It is. The simple act of remembering a thing physically changes the thing being remembered.
That creates a wild paradox. It means a memory I revisit constantly. Like my favorite childhood story that I tell at every single dinner party might actually be less faithful to the original event than a random boring memory I haven't thought about in a decade.
Absolutely, because every time you tell that dinner party story, you open the file, you add a little flourish based on the audience's laughter, you emphasize a detail to make it funnier, and then you save over the old version.
Wow.
A memory you rarely touch hasn't been subjected to that endless cycle of editing and resaving.
I can see how that's harmless for a dinner party story.
Yeah.
But applying that to the real world sounds incredibly dangerous. If our memories are that malleable, what happens in a high-stakes situation like eyewitness testimony in a criminal trial?
The consequences are severe. Eyewitnesses can, with absolute sincerity, remember details that never happened.
Just because of how they're asked about it.
Yeah, because when an investigator asks a leading question saying, "Did you see the broken headlight?" instead of "Did you see a broken headlight?" the brain opens the memory file, takes in the suggestion of the broken headlight, assumes it must have been there, and hits save on a merged version of reality.
The witness isn't lying on the stand. Their brain genuinely believes the new edit is the original file.
The witness is telling the truth as their brain currently reconstructs it. And, the science goes even further to demonstrate this malleability. Researchers have conducted landmark studies, most notably by cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, where they successfully implanted entirely false memories into healthy adults.
You mean they convinced people they experienced a completely fabricated event?
They did.
How do you even design an ethical study to test that?
The methodology was brilliant. Researchers contacted the families of the volunteers to gather 3 true stories from their childhood. Then they wrote up a booklet containing 4 stories, the 3 true ones and 1 entirely false one.
Okay.
The false story was that the volunteer had been lost in a specific shopping mall as a young child, was crying, and was eventually rescued by an elderly person and returned to their family.
They just gave them the booklet and said, "Do you remember this?"
Essentially, yes. They interviewed the volunteers over several weeks. They suggested the event happened with a lot of authority. In the first interview, most volunteers said they didn't remember the mall incident.
Because it never happened.
Right. But the researchers asked them to just think about it, to try to picture it. By the third interview, about a quarter of the volunteers not only remembered being lost in the mall, but they began providing rich, vivid sensory details that weren't even in the original booklet.
Wait, really? Like what?
They described the flannel shirt the elderly rescuer was wearing, or the exact feeling of panic they had near the shoe display.
I have this distinct memory of dropping my grandmother's favorite vase when I was 6. But my older sister insists she was the one who dropped it. We've argued about it for years.
Oh, sibling memory wars are the best examples of this.
Hearing this makes me realize it's entirely possible my brain just absorbed her story, opened my own memory file of the living room, inserted myself into the action, and hit save.
It is highly likely. The mall study volunteers weren't unusually suggestible people. Their brains were just doing exactly what memory is designed to do.
Which is reconstruct.
Yes. It was reconstructing a plausible scenario from fragments of real memories. They knew what malls looked like, they knew what being scared felt like, and they wove them together into a new narrative.
If our memories are this easily hacked, altered, and overwritten just by someone suggesting a flannel shirt, I have to be honest, that sounds like a massive biological design flaw.
I get why you'd say that.
Why would millions of years of human evolution saddle us with a system that is so deeply faulty?
It certainly feels like a flaw when our standard of perfection is a digital video camera. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of our biology, we see it isn't a flaw at all. It is a highly optimized feature.
How is being wrong a feature?
Well, a flawless, perfect archive of every single moment of your life would require an enormous amount of metabolic energy to store. But more importantly, a perfect archive wouldn't actually be useful for survival.
Wait, why wouldn't it be useful? If I'm an early human trying to survive in a hostile environment, wouldn't I want to remember exactly where the predator was?
You'd want to remember the threat, yes. But what kept our ancestors alive was not the perfect recall of every single leaf on the specific bush the tiger hid behind on a Tuesday.
Oh, I see.
What kept them alive was the ability to extract the gist of an experience, to generalize from it, and to use that generalization to predict what might happen tomorrow. Memory is not an archive of the past, it is a prediction engine for the future.
So it's about being flexible. If I memorize the exact visual of one specific tiger, I might not recognize a slightly different predator hiding behind a completely different rock.
Exactly. By extracting the gist, your brain creates a flexible rule. Large animal plus sudden movement equals danger. A system that blends related events together, that updates with new information, and that sheds irrelevant details is vastly superior at keeping you alive.
Shedding irrelevant details.
Yeah.
You know, that reframes the entire concept of forgetting. We constantly treat forgetting as a personal failure. We say, oh, I have a terrible memory, I forgot their name.
We are very hard on ourselves about it.
But you're saying forgetting is a necessary part of the design.
Forgetting is a crucial biological feature. It is a filtering mechanism. Imagine if you genuinely remembered every single face you passed on a crowded subway, every mundane meal you ever ate, every license plate you glanced at in traffic.
That sounds overwhelming.
It would be paralyzing. The truly important lessons, the critical information you need to thrive, would drown in a sea of trivial clutter.
The sticky notes would cover the entire desk until you couldn't see the wood underneath.
Forgetting is the brain's highly efficient way of sweeping the desk clean so the important tasks can surface. The biological goal is never total retention. It was always useful retention.
So what does this all mean for us as we go about our daily lives? We've totally dismantled the video camera myth. We've explored how the hippocampus creates a temporary index, how sleep transfers that map using high-speed ripples, how the simple act of remembering edits the file, and how our brains purposefully forget things just to survive.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And for anyone listening right now, learning that their mind is inventing details might feel a little destabilizing. Are our memories just completely worthless fictions?
Not at all. We shouldn't swing to the opposite extreme. The system works remarkably well. The broad strokes of your life, the core truths of your experiences are generally accurate.
Okay, that's a relief.
Yeah, the memory system allows us to learn language, build relationships, and navigate complex environments perfectly fine. But understanding the science means we need to approach our own minds differently. The main takeaway is that we must hold our recollections with a healthy dose of humility.
Humility. Because the feeling of certainty is part of the illusion.
It is. The vivid, absolute certainty you feel about a distant event is not a guarantee of its historical accuracy. Confidence and correctness are simply two different things in the human brain.
That is such an important distinction.
You can be 100% confident in a memory that has been heavily edited over the years.
Your memory is less a secure, locked library of historical records and much more a living, breathing story. It's a story you tell yourself, and it gets revised just a little bit each time you tell it based on who you are today.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And honestly, I find some comfort in that. That imperfect, constantly evolving story is a large part of what makes you a dynamic human being. Which leaves me with one final thought for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
I'm ready.
We've established that your memories are actively reconstructed. They are editable, and they're deeply influenced by your current state of mind. So if your past is a living document, constantly being revised by whatever new things you've learned, and however you are feeling today, how much power does your present mood have to completely rewrite your own past? Think about it. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.